you. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good night. I always like to, you never know how many people are joining from all different regions of the world. So thank you for joining me. As Paul said, my name is, Majo. I am from, I noticed some of you are from my country. So I'm from Uruguay, which is a small country in South America. And well, as you all know, today we're talking about e-safety, online safety, the whole idea of raising awareness in the classroom. And I guess the first thing that I would like to think about with you is, should we? You know, why is it always the ELT teachers that tend to do these trendy new topics? What is it about our profession, our particular subject, that we end up always talking about these topics in our classrooms? So basically, the idea of today is to have a look about your thoughts, think about the local policies that you have in place. So we'll look at some definitions, of course, and then practical ideas that we can use this in the classroom. I do like a lot of participation. So when I ask a question, please feel free to write in the chat. I will be paying attention to the chat as we go along. So please feel free to ask questions, make comments. Questions in the Q&A I'll answer at the end, but as we go through the presentation, I'll ask some questions, and then hopefully we can have this back and forward sort of interaction, which is what I love. So I asked a few weeks ago through Facebook, LinkedIn. I asked all over the place, and I also asked, we had the team that shared this link, and basically we were asking, what 3 things come to mind when you think of online safeguarding? Online safeguarding is a big thing. We are starting to, I think in the recent last 5 years, we've become more aware of online safeguarding. We're starting to be a little bit more skeptical and ask questions. And I think that is a good thing that's happening. So now, people are starting to share things, and we started kind of like think and pause and stop. And it's that 3 or 4 seconds of pausing that is extremely important, because that is what online safeguarding is. It's about thinking and stopping and making sure that we are also safe. It's the same thing as when we walk down the street. It's not something that we need to be always scared. And I think this is the key part. Looking at some of the words that came up, it tends to be a bit scary. We're thinking about, hackers, cybercrime, but imagine walking down the street. We're not always thinking about hackers and cybercrime. We're not thinking about, I'm going to get robbed. No, we're walking down the street. We are being aware of our surroundings. If we are in places that we're not aware of, maybe we walk a little bit more attentive. And that should be our online safeguarding path. We should be thinking about the same thing online. Do I know the websites? Do I know this? How is it that we go through the online world in a safe way without going to the other extreme of, I'm terrified, I'm not going to go online. So when we think about, when I asked about it, so a lot of things came, data protection is a big thing, privacy, information, but I like the word awareness. And I think this is probably the strongest thing that we need to have. What is awareness? The privacy, privacy was you can see that it was repeated quite a lot. And so, yes, loads of things. I like how some people start even giving tips in this, like going incognito and things like that. So yes, I think a lot of the times we think about online safeguarding, maybe we're thinking it's something negative, but it's also some things that we can have a look at and explore with our students. One of the great things that we need to think about is, why us? What is it about our subject that lends itself to so many different topics and trendy topics throughout, always? What is it about us? And one of the things is that because we are language teachers, because we teach in a way that pretty much anything can go as long as we're using the language, That is why we are the ideal candidates for this, because we focus on topics. So we focus on topics of interest, and online technology is always a topic of interest. And it's always, if you are guided with a course book and you need to follow that course book, you will always have an aspect of technology. You'll always have a unit, a question, an activity on technology. And that is where you can introduce the online safeguarding. So why us? Because it's so easy to include it in the classroom. That's why I think that English teachers have this great benefit. But of course, we also need to inform ourselves and make sure that we are able to do this. So when we're thinking about e-safety or online safety, there are many websites out there. I strongly recommend this website. It is in the links. I'm sure the team will be sharing now the presentation, the handout with some of the links of today's session. This particular website is fantastic on online safety. It gives great information, it has great resources, so feel free to, thank you, Melissa, you can see it on the screens. It has great tips on how to go about, online safety, introducing, and this is their definition, it's being aware of the nature of the possible threats that you could encounter whilst engaging in activity through the internet. These could be security threats, protecting and managing your personal data, online reputation management, and avoiding harmful illegal content. This is online safety, but I want you to think about the typical normal safety of walking outside. You're not thinking constantly, but you are aware of your surroundings. You know when you are places that are unsafe, you realize, and that's when you're more alert. When you're maybe walking with friends and things, you're a little bit more relaxed. So don't be scared of the online world. I think this is the key part, because the thing is that a lot of this we are learning as we go along. This year we've had a lot at the end of last year, but this year made this big boom of the AI world. AI has come to revolutionize and change everything. And we'll be talking about that in a few minutes. So we can't be scared, but we also need to realize there are a lot of things that we are learning as we go along. So that is why we need to become more aware of what's happening. And most importantly, not be scared, because there's always an undo button, but don't be gullible either. Be careful when you see things, be careful, make sure that things are actually, we do have a lot of things that people that are impersonating others and official websites and things. Be careful with that. Make sure that whatever you are joining and going through, it is actually a safe place. So these are things that we need to bear in mind. Now, the first thing we need to think about is, do you know your own policies? At your schools, language institutions, what is the process when it comes to online safety? A lot of schools have, for example, places where they guard. You have filters, online filters. At my school, for example, we have online filters that avoid, things have been added into our browsers. So when they enter a site, they don't see these ads coming up all the time. They don't see this phishing things and getting them information. Of course, inappropriate content is not easily available. So what is the process that you have in your school, and what is the procedure if there is a breach? What happens when there is an issue? Is there a thinking behind it? Nowadays, a lot of schools have these policies. If your school doesn't have a policy or you don't know it, ask about it. There are many online places where you can actually learn different policies and, take advantage of those policies that have been written and adapt them to your schools. So it's important to know what we have, because then you need to think about how are you putting them into practice. So for example, something as innocent as, I remember, 10, 15 years ago, I had a class of students, and because we didn't have website, we didn't have pretty much, we didn't have like a learning platform as we do today, talking about 15 years ago. I've always been very always very energetic when it comes to the new flashy things. So I started to use Facebook groups as an online platform, because that's what I could have. It was a safe place because all my students had Facebook. I created a Facebook for teaching, so it was separate from my own personal, so they couldn't get access to my information. I made a closed group so other people couldn't join, they couldn't see what we were sharing. And that was, I think, for the times, was extremely probably the safest way to go. I had a Facebook group, all my students had it. We uploaded information. We uploaded, for example, what we did that week. So I always had a student who said, okay, this week we did this, this, and this. So if somebody was away, they knew they could go to the Facebook group. We took photos of those in those Facebook groups and uploaded it there. So my question is, all these things that are happening, all these things that we're coming into practice and things were things that were showing up in the classroom. And this is what I was putting into practice at the times. As I said, there was nothing else that I could do in the context because I didn't have this. Now, we didn't have either a procedure. So there are photos there of us working, or having fun in the classroom as we like to have. And they were in the Facebook groups. Now, it was a closed Facebook group. I didn't even allow parents to join. I am talking secondary school. So, because I didn't want that content out of my control. I wanted the content out of the control. Now, what happens? Those photos could have been shared, could have been used for bullying. Now, what would have happened if that was the case? Luckily, I did not have that issue. We didn't have a procedure either. But what would have happened if? So 15 years later, we have procedures, we have a process. For example, certain photos I don't upload anymore. I upload group photos, I upload things that, will not be used for bullying purposes. Maybe when a student does a presentation, I might take a photo or not, but I always make sure that I get their consent. It's these things have been really good in the past, in my case. Burak, I like what you're saying about using Facebook groups for flipped learning. I did that a lot thanks to that particular group. Now, today, I don't need to use social media and I can use my learning platform because our school we have the procedures, we have the process. Our policies are now, you cannot become friends with your students or follow each other in social media. That's one of our policies, for example. Another policy is schoolwork gets uploaded to the platforms that we use at school. So these are the things that have come through experience, have come through getting to know the dangers, the possible dangers and the possible things. But again, as I said, we are learning as we go along. So it's now, for example, I always pause and think, okay, what could happen with this photo? Can this photo be misinterpreted before uploading? For example, if we are having a group photo of the classroom, because I always like to have the banner of the classroom photo, I make sure that we look good. So, it's a fair thing. So in those sorts of things, and of course, I get my students to give me permission. Do you all agree well, I want a class photo to upload to our classroom. Do you agree? Oh, yes. And then we all have that class photo and upload. But I take the photo and I make sure that it's on my phone, just in case. No, it's about safety. It's about, we can't always, I know that those photos could be edited and could, but I'm uploading it to a group. I'm uploading it to our platform that it's for educational purposes. So I'm not going to go through that fear of what if. I'm making sure that I'm doing the best that I can without going to the other extreme of not actually doing anything fun with my students. We can't go from one extreme to the other. So finding a healthy balance. An important thing is communicating. For example, how far should schools, be involved in cases of bullying outside of school hours? This is a tricky thing. How far should schools, get involved? Because if there is cyberbullying outside of the classroom, How is that, what is the policy in place? For example, I know some schools, what they use is that if the bullying is placed in a Facebook group, in a WhatsApp group or whatever group that the kids have, that is a school-based WhatsApp group. So usually what happens is that, kids have a group, year nines all have a Facebook WhatsApp group. So they share, the homework, or they share comments or information, that sort of thing. If the cyberbullying happens in those groups, then the school takes action. If the bullying happens outside of those groups, the school takes action, but it's a bit different. It's not such strong responsibility because it's out of the school. But how far should we go? Because I think it's a very difficult line of, should we do something? Yes. But what happens when there's cyberbullying across schools? Because that also happens. What are you going to do? How are two schools going to, so having these policies and thinking about things will help the teachers know how to handle things, and then we know how to put things into practice. So another thing we need to think about is practical ideas. Now, practical ideas in the classroom came from what you suggested. Okay, so for example, from those questions, a lot of people talked about privacy, about information, responsibility, awareness, and protection. So some of the practical ideas that I brought today have to do with these cases. And one of the most important things is exposure. Okay, so what we need to think about is ask our student, who is on the other side? Do you chat online? Who do you chat online with? How much personal information am I being asked? Another question is, how are we dealing with this? It's really difficult to focus on this. And how much personal information am I being asked for? The typical, here in my country, anything that you have to apply for, you have to, for some reason, they ask you your ID, your personal ID. They ask you name, full name, name, surname, date of birth, emails, address, and your ID. Now, those 7 things are quite basic things, but it's also everything that I need to do any legal procedures, I need to do that. And sometimes I ask, why do you need my ID just to access this web page? It's kind of strange sometimes. So in my case, I try to avoid. So a lot of things has to do with our exposure and trying to think about how we put, into practice certain things. And this is something that we need to focus with. So how much personal information am I being asked for? So ask the students, when they go online. So I think it's really good about, fun things that you can do in the classroom is you can have those 5 minutes of speaking. And these topics, because they are so serious topics that we should focus on, I don't usually penalize my students if they go to their L1. Again, we are talking about, maybe, for example, at the beginning or at the end of the class, you've got those 5-10 minutes where if you're like me, my students might be late. I come from a South American country, and those of you who are from here know that our students are usually late. Sometimes most of the times it's the teachers that move from class to class, unlike other schools where students move, but they're still late coming to their own class. So I sometimes have, maybe at the first 5 minutes, I have 10 students out of 30 or maybe 20. So what I do is I try to always stop and, put a few questions on the board for them to discuss. And sometimes I said, do you chat online? Who is the person on the other side? Are you sure that they are who they are? How do you know? And I let them chat, and those are the things that happen. And I think that's quite an interesting thing that we have, is that, and then let them talk. And then another day I might ask, how much personal information have you been asked for when joining? Or what was the latest web page that they asked for information. How much personal information did they ask? And leave those questions there. Get them to start to think, because when people put things into words, it's when they start to think, oh, maybe I gave too much information. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. And that's when you start to think. And when thinking comes, that's when we know our students are, getting involved and starting to have this critical thinking mindset. We know critical thinking is one of the skills that our students need today, but I also think it's one of the least wanted skills from students. Those are the things that I would probably focus on. Burak, thank you for making that comment about large classrooms. When I mean I give those questions on the board, I don't have whole classes. I get them to talk in pairs or groups. So with 40 students, I would probably put them in groups of 4. So you have 10 groups and you can monitor. And just take 5-10 minutes. I'll probably give them 5 minutes of talking and then stop. And then maybe as I walk around, because you have so many students and I wouldn't want this activity to digress so much, because I like maybe exposure, like putting these type of questions on the board every day for maybe a month or now and again for the whole year. I don't want it to be the central part of the activity. So maybe I would walk around and just to take notes of keywords they're saying or phrases and then put them up on the board. This is a summary for today. This is what you've said. Be careful. Always think twice before giving information. Always think twice about who you're talking to. I've done these sort of things with my students, a lot of my students, which I think is something that we can do with, with our students. We can do this with our students, giving those summaries, giving the keywords and helping them think. Okay, so these sort of activities that I'm thinking of, this one in particular is just putting questions there and then finding out to see what happens. I learned a lot of my students play online with each other. So who are you, okay, when you play video games, who are you playing with? Oh, no, I play with him. Oh, okay. So at least in that sense, no, I don't want to play with strangers. I get, my parents don't allow me. And I think this is great because parents are becoming more aware. In the past is, oh, that's fine. Those students are, that person's talking online, it's from the other side of the world. There's no danger. But are they from the other side of the world? So I think parents today are a bit more aware of this. So I think, again, a lot of things we are learning as we go along. And as we go along, we become safer because we have more experience in things. So exposure and getting kids to think about this is a key aspect. So those short sorts of questions are great. Another thing that you might be able to do is thinking about, maybe this will probably be a longer video, a longer lesson. I always like to watch videos and it's very tricky to get videos that are suitable for all levels. And this particular video is suitable for all levels of English. There are no words. So it's just images and it's so nicely done that it's attractive to watch. Many things can come. The higher the levels, you can get more abstract. The lower the levels, maybe you can create a class rules with online worlds. So I'm going to show you, I'm not going to show you the video because of copyright issues, but you can find it freely available online. It's on YouTube. Again, it's done by this amazing company in the UK, Online Safety. And you can find it, they've uploaded themselves to YouTube. So once again, my safeguarding has been paid. it's doing well. You can find it online, and of course, really useful. And it's encouraged for you to use it in the classroom. So I'm going to show you some of the screenshots that I took from this video, and think about how you could use this video. Okay, and and then we'll come back to the second point. So here you see a little girl coming into her dad's office. And what does she see? The computer. It's on and it's free. So she's really excited. Look at her face. She can go in. There's, it hasn't been logged. So it's her moment. So she sneaks into the office and starts to play. So it's a, it's a simple, innocent game where the little girl needs to get the bananas. Now, what you don't see is that here it's been downloaded or it's already easily on the screen. So clearly this little girl has played it before. Okay, so these are the things that we see. And then as we're going along, we see this little girl moving the monkey so it has to grab all the bananas. So the little girl is having fun and playing, these sorts of simple games the kids love. And then this appeared. Win a teddy bear, click here, and she clicks. And another pop-up comes and she clicks. And another, and another, and another. All of these are appearing all of a sudden. Now, what happened? Could it be a virus? It could be. Could it be a scam? It could be. But this little girl is terrified now. Plus, it's making all this sound. The little girl is terrified now. Luckily, her dad comes. He looks at the computer and then he sees that he can actually close those adverts. You've got the little cross there. And the poor little girl, you feel bad for her, don't you? I like Borak. Adults also click on advertisements. I mean, even what I hated is that sometimes this is something that we need to become aware of. Sometimes those adverts change the icon. So when you automatically go and close, it's actually enter. This has happened to me. So be careful with those. Always pay attention to make sure you know where to close. But yes, even adults happen. And imagine, win a teddy bear. And what I liked about this video is that there's a moment of pause when there's just one ad, it says, and it's like the little girl looking, oh, teddy bear, and then looks at the little eyes of the bunny, and so you have that moment, and then she clicks, and then everything goes crazy. So this little girl realizes she's made a mistake, but she can't fix it because she's a little girl. Now, before we go on and say, where was the father? Maybe the father went out to get a coffee. Maybe the father went to the kitchen, This was a split second of the computer being unattended. My computer's in my office. My son can come and go. Luckily, he's 4, so he has no idea that he can play with the computer yet. And so I'm just as, this could have been my problem as well. My son has more than once come into my office, and all of a sudden I see him playing with my keyboard, and I had WhatsApp open. So he's messaging and things to my friends and colleagues, and luckily, so people are used to it by now. So when they see all these letters, they know it was my son. But I mean, I'm lucky that that's only the issue that I've had with him in that sense, but it's just one split second. So the little girl starts to cry, starts to shout, and her dad comes in, looks at her, and helps her. It does have a happy ending because they end up playing both together. So it's a great video to show students and to discuss. I mean, many things you can do with lower levels. How could you use this video? To talk about online safety. Think about, I mean, higher levels, it's simple. What went wrong? What happened? But with younger students, how could you use this video? One of the things that I would have used for is what happened? And then there can the girl use the computer without her parents? You can't use a computer alone, and then you can you can pre-teach some vocabulary to help you create those rules. But and it's really great. And for example, Sarah, you're making an interesting point about YouTube videos. Now, a lot of the times YouTube videos have a lot of advertising. Might not be related, I agree. The other day, for example, I wanted to show my students a trailer of a film to get them talking about something, and all of a sudden I had like an advert. And the problem is that, again, I'm here talking about e-safety, so you would think that I know my stuff, and I thought I knew my stuff, and I watched it at home and I didn't get any advertising. So I said, oh, good, great, easy to use. And then I get advertising at school, because advertising is random. You know, maybe I watched already 2 or 3 videos with advertising, and then when I watched that one, it didn't have it. I don't know what happened. The thing is that I had advertising, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm lucky that we have, you know, usually the advertising isn't inappropriate, but it did break the whole climate that I had built in my classroom. So, you know, it was kind of like a solemn type of environment. And then all of a sudden this advert kind of like was completely opposite. So it destroyed my planning and mood setting and things, but that's fine. I mean, plan B, I just clicked end and continued the film. But, you know, those things do happen. So online safety is not only about avoiding harmful issues, but it's also being aware of what the online world is and feeling comfortable, because that little girl was in doubt, you know? So maybe, for example, click the X. Don't enter something that pops up, you know? Don't enter pop-up advertising. And these are the things that we can use using our language. That is a key fact. Okay, so these are some of the things that this particular video, again, it's available. Melissa shared it earlier, so please feel free to use it, but definitely loads of things that we need to think about. Now, misinformation is fantastic. I really, really enjoyed this particular article. A few years ago, in one of our MOOCs, British Council MOOCs on online safety, this was something that we shared. It was a tree. It was it was an advert on save the octopus, the tree octopus. Sorry. So it was an octopus that lived in trees, so outside of the world, outside of the of the ocean. So yeah, that's very likely an octopus outside, you know. And I remember I had my son next to me, and I remember first of all having to share this article in this course. I'm thinking, what? And I said, I need to see this. Because the worst part is that I didn't even see the use of the article. I just found the link, and I'm thinking, what do you mean a tree octopus? What? Is there a tree under the water? And then I see and there's a photo of an octopus on a tree. And then about, trying to raise funds for this thing. And it was fantastic, because this is one of the things that I really enjoyed about this particular, article. It doesn't look like a real website. It looks kind of fake. It's very simple. The image is really well done, but most importantly, the article itself should have raised a lot of red flags, so when it comes to raising awareness, I think it's important. Again, misinformation, fake news, everything, it's really important. But to be able to raise awareness, especially with not lower levels of English, I mean younger students, because younger students tend to be a bit more, maybe more gullible. It's just to raise their critical thinking, save the tree octopus. And kids go, what? I want, that moment of, are you sure? A tree octopus? What do you mean? An octopus that lives in trees? And that is critical thinking. Get the kids to think. And this is the key factor, is that we need to, with misinformation, and this is why I think that it's really important to be as ridiculous as possible. First, to have fun. And then just to start to help the students realize that everything online is not true. And these sorts of things start to appear, and, start to think about different suggestions and things. I don't want to run out of time, and I definitely want to talk about this topic. Where does AI fall into place? Now, this is a difficult aspect, right? AI, the ChatGPT, is fantastic. I'm not going to deny that I don't think it's useful. And yes, I know that there are potential threats about cheating, about plagiarism, about all of those things. I completely agree with everything that you are thinking. But what about safeguarding? Are we thinking about safeguarding? And one of the tricky things when I was preparing this presentation, one of the things that I was thinking about is, how can I talk about AI when it's constantly evolving? When there are constant changes, everything is happening so quickly. So how can we, how can I raise awareness to you so you can raise your students' awareness? So one of the things that I think, these are some of the tips that we need to think about is not only about copying and pasting what comes from AI, because I think that's very well known, but what we put into AI. For example, one of the things that when I started to try out different activities and different things for AI in the classroom, I grabbed something that I wrote, like I purposely wrote something at A1 level, and I said, okay, I'm going to copy paste it into AI, and I put fix this article as to a B1 level, and it gave me some feedback, correct the adjectives, use more linkers, the typical things that I would say, and it was really good in that sense. I'm thinking, wow, imagine if students would copy and paste all their work into AI, and they would get like the self-feedback. And that would mean that, it's one more correction without the teacher. So yay for us, less work. So anything that's less work is fantastic for us. But then I stopped. What happens now? Because one of the things, if we read the privacy notification, if you read the rules of AI, once you go in, one of the things is that everything that is input, everything that is added to as an input is stored. The whole idea of that storing is to get that information, to keep that information, for it to evolve, to learn more. It's a whole idea of improving ChatGPT. Now, the thing is that I just put a whole paragraph of my work online. And what happens with that? Do I lose ownership now? So those sorts of things are coming into play. What happens if this is then given to somebody else? And so it's kind of tricky in that sense. So instead of thinking about students, I said, don't put the whole paragraph, don't put a whole text, maybe put 3 or 4 sentences just to see, fix these sentences to a B2 level or a C1 level. And what I do is that okay, look at the feedback from there. What can you reflect on that? Okay, it tells you to use more than one adjective. Okay, great. So let's look at adjectives that, collocate with these particular words. So if you're using articles, it's good to have adjectives. We need to be careful, because I really thought it was great to copy paste my work, and then I'm thinking, oh, so again, we need to be able to think about things, because those prompts are stored in AI as it learns. So we need to be careful of what we put and what our students put. Again, as I completely agree with everybody saying, Maria, you're making a great point, a fantastic colleague from Australia. It's easy to forget that anything you input is stored somewhere. Everything that you put somewhere online, it's stored. Now, what we put there, is it something that we want to store there? That's the key factor that we need to think about. So when it comes to AI, be careful. There are things that we can stay safe. But as always, this constant, it's constantly evolving. So again, raise awareness. We don't know what's going to happen with AI. And I think that's a tricky part. I feel like I'm in 1990s again, when, internet had exploded. So this is how I feel at the moment with this. So focus on that. Another thing is, so think before posting. This is has to do with more digital responsibility, to be awake. There's a famous saying, a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. So it's really good to establish netiquette. It's good to establish boundaries. As a moderator, one of the things that we always talk about before the start of a new course is netiquette. What you say and how you say it is very important. When you are online and I can see face to face and you can see my gestures and you can see how I'm saying things, maybe my irony is clear that it's becoming that I'm saying something in an ironic manner. But if I write it, and it might not be clear that it's an irony. So netiquette, for example, one of the things that I avoid at all times is irony, because I don't want people to feel as if I am being rude to them. Now, irony is a strong part of my culture. We are very ironic people. So if I am ironic to my students, they understand it because I'm there with them. But online, I avoid those sorts of things. And these are the things that we need to become more aware of. So be careful what you post, make sure that what you're posting is true. And if you aren't sure, use a source, according to this, I found this out. Maybe you're not sure, maybe you are, those sort of things can happen. And then, of course, protection. I think we need to get students to become more minded about how they use the online world, protections, the passwords, the level of personal information, I think, is key. How much information? Remember the first questions. How much information is too much information? When you log into a some web pages ask us to log in. How much information are you given? What information are you using? For example, I use my school account for a lot of web pages where I have to log in to, they ask you to log in. If it's education-based, I use my school account, no doubt. So, access with Google, with Microsoft, whatever, that's what I use. Now, when I do that, all my educations are attached to my school email, and that's useful for me, because otherwise I would have to have 50,000 passwords and I would probably end up with the same password for everything. And we know that's not safe. So be careful with passwords. Be careful of how much information you are giving to the online world. And who is that online world? It's not the same when you are enrolling for a course, when you're enrolling for things that it's clear that you need this. But, lack of level of in-person information is vital. I think another aspect that we need to think about is our students should respect the age limits of social media. Instagram is suggested for older than 13. TikTok, no idea, but there are those suggestions. So let's get our students to use those suggestions so that way we know how to help them out. These are the things the key factors that we need to bear in mind. Again, those sorts of questions of how young is too young for Instagram, and get them to discuss. What is the age limit of Instagram, or what should be the age limit of Instagram? These little questions throughout the year are going to be, and you take advantage of class time. The students are speaking, and you can make the questions as simple as possible so that way language doesn't become a barrier. If you hear students going into L1, listen to what they're saying and try not to penalize too much, because sometimes this is a serious topic. And if they want to say something, I think it's better to say it than not say anything. Again, this activity I'm suggesting takes 3 minutes. So 3 minutes of L1 is not going to make a difference in the classroom when it comes to English, but it could make a difference tomorrow when they go online. So we need to strike a balance there. And maybe when you are doing the group collection, you say that in English, so that way they know how to say those keywords. But I think it's really useful in that sense, because it's our responsibility to educate. It's our responsibility to raise awareness. Why should we? Because we should, because that's our job. Because we teach more than language. We teach more than our subjects. We teach students to prepare for this new world that we are learning ourselves. So first thing we need to do is, like in the handout, you've got a few questions about yourselves. How digitally aware are you? How safe are you online? Is there something that you could be doing more? How can you do that? And then you grow us, we need to grow ourselves. So this is why we need to learn about digital awareness. This is why we need to have this more digital citizenship, which is one of the key factors of what we want our students to be at this stage. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope that it was useful. I know there are some questions coming up. So thank you once again, and
thanks,
happy to answer.
There are a few questions. Thanks very much for that. And really important, I think, like just that last point about what you were saying about us, as teachers being, learning for ourselves. Otherwise, it's very difficult to kind of pass that on to our learners, and they come in.
Definitely.
Yeah. And interesting about AI as well. You made me think back to things that I've put into ChatGPT, and if I've put whole paragraphs of, I don't own that anymore, do I? Anyway, okay. So we have got a few questions. Some of them I think are sort of rhetorical, possibly. Mm-hmm. Ada's asking, how can we be sure who is on the other side of the screen? I mean,
you can't.
No.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, you can't. How do I know you're on the other side of the screen?
Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, interesting from Burak. When we write questions, when we write some questions about online safety on the board, I think he means not beard, unless he's talking about, anyway, how can we handle the discussion process better in large classrooms with 40 to 45 students? I know you sort of touched on that, and you said, put them into groups and so on, but maybe just sort of a summary would be useful.
With large groups, I mean, once again, it's with everything in our classrooms, we need to think about the aim. My aim with those sorts of questions to discuss is to raise awareness and to get students to think. It's not about getting long turns. It's not about, it's the whole idea is to get students to think. So maybe with 40 students, it's very difficult to have pair work. Maybe it's difficult to manage or to speak. If you don't feel it's difficult, then go for it, go pair work. Large classes, I would probably make however many students you have, I would probably have 10 to 15 groups, which I think it's more manageable. And you go from group to group. Time yourself 5 minutes, get them talking, walk around to take notes of what they're saying, and then go to the board and have a summary. Okay, so these were your ideas on the board of this talk. Anything else you want to add? And then close it. 10 minutes, it's over, you go into the rest of the class. The whole idea of these 5-minute activities, it's not about correcting language. It's not about, anything else other than raising awareness and getting kids to think about those activities.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Great. Okay, another few questions here. Oh, it's interesting from Vanita. How can we help students come out from social media addiction? It's a big question. We haven't really got that long. I mean, I don't know. Do you find, okay, this just sort of to expand on that a little bit. Do you find that your learners, I'm just thinking of my kids, I've got 2 kids, teenagers, and they're not really using social media as much in the same way as perhaps I am at my age,
Really?
But they don't use Facebook. It's for old people.
No, Facebook,
as far as they're concerned.
Sorry.
yeah. Instagram a little bit. It's more kind of TikTok, I think. But
they're watching videos most, and then some are creating, but most are watching, in fact.
Yeah. I mean, is it our responsibility as English language teachers to be kind of looking at that and supporting that and discussing things like social media and overuse of social media? Is it? I mean, it comes into e-safety, I'm guessing, but the addiction side of it is, I don't know.
I think that's a tricky thing. Maybe I would raise awareness of, okay, how much time is enough, or how much is too much on social media, maybe getting them to think about that. If there is an addiction, like an issue of a student is in your classroom constantly with their social media, then maybe that's a different thing. Maybe you need to talk to parents, get schools, but I don't think it has to do with with policies there. I think it's more to do with how can we help this student who clearly has an addiction. It's like any other addiction. So I don't think it's our responsibility, but it's good to always, how much is too much kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Question here from Benedictus is asking, do you have realistic practice that you do for students to raise awareness? I mean, you showed that video. There's the video there with the girl. I'm still thinking about your child coming in and sending WhatsApp messages to your friends. It's quite amusing.
Sorry, Melissa, if you get one of those.
But is there anything else that you can kind of think of where you sort of real examples where something has happened and so on?
The fake news one is always good. So I come in very serious, and so I always go to the tree. Okay, today I want to talk about something serious, and I keep a serious face about the importance of raising awareness of how to help our environment because our tree octopus is dying. And my students look at themselves because they don't know at this stage if I'm making a joke or if I'm being serious. So those sorts of things. But these are questions, getting them to discuss, asking them, get them to read ridiculous articles, maybe like take advantage and do like a true or false, language awareness sort of thing, and then get them to talk about the topic, those sorts of things. Those are what I use in the classroom. Sometimes, when fake news was always on the news, that topic, I always talked about how do you know it's fake? How much is fake? So I take advantage also of what's happening around the world. I think that's a really good thing. I remember, for example, I don't know if I'm sure you remember, Paul, we used to have these teachers, holding a piece of paper. My students don't believe this image will travel the world. Please write where you are from. And those pictures travel the world. And then I thought that was really, wow. These teachers are worried about how far a photo could travel. So I think those sort of things are great.
Okay. I remember the tree octopus. I remember Nikki Hockley doing a session about the tree octopus.
Exactly.
Which is a good one. Yeah, quite interesting.
We all love that.
Yeah. But I remember as a participant in that session, genuinely sort of believing for quite a long time that the tree octopus was a real thing, and then you kind of go in and look at the website and go, oh, okay, right. I mean, it's a bit gullible, perhaps, but anyway. All right, we've probably got time for one more question. This is from Aptem, I think. This is about that kind of link between parents and teachers of young learner students. How it says, do we need to inform parents of young learners about our plans to interact with AI during the lesson? Is it our responsibility to sort of do that? I'm not sure.
I don't think so. First look at your talk to your schools, find out your policy at your school. But the thing is that AI, you're not asking students to contact anybody online. It's AI. So I think in that sense, it's safer, in fact, than anything else that we do online. I don't think, because in fact, if you want to talk about the right usage of AI, I think it's really useful. I've been having loads of fun and learning. I'm doing a crash course pretty much because we don't know what we're doing anyway. So, but yes, I don't think we need to inform parents. I think it's about just talk to your heads at school just in case. But I don't think it's something that I would specifically ask for information.
Yeah, I guess there's sort of a need for. You talked about policies and school policies and having sort of safeguarding policies in place. I suppose the danger sometimes is that schools go, okay, well, we've got our safeguarding policy, tick that box, done. And
it needs to be looked at.
I was going to say, that especially now with AI and everything, that policy needs to be reviewed on a at the very minimum on an annual basis, right?
I think AI is so difficult to write policies, but I think we need to think about the basics. AI, you're not talking to anybody, so I think that itself is different. So in that sense, it's a bit safer. I don't think I think it's talk to schools about it, because it's so new, people aren't sure how to use it. But I think it's really good that students learn that it's more than cheating. You know, it's a tool for something else. Take advantage of that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we've pretty much run out of time. So we're going to stop there. But thank you ever so much, Macho. That was really engaging, really interesting. And yeah, lots of comments in the chat from everyone. Thank you for those, and thank you for your positivity and your compliments for our presenter. We're going to be back in about 15 minutes with Stuart and Kevin, who are going to be looking at workers' representation. I'm just going to very quickly just deal with this. There's a few questions about certificates, people watching from a mobile. If you're still there, we will be emailing you later today with a link to the certificate and any other relevant things that you need. So don't worry. Okay. All right, Macho. Thank you. Thanks very much. And
thank you, everybody.
See you again. Thanks, everyone. And see you next time.